The sound came at dawn, rolling through the Crimson Valley like thunder from a clear sky. Taemin was in the lab when it started, and the coffee cup in his hand shook so hard that brown liquid splashed across his notes. The walls trembled. The floor vibrated beneath his feet. For 30 seconds, the entire research outpost seemed to hold its breath while that impossible sound filled the air. Then it stopped. Tae-Dashmin stood frozen, his heart pounding. He had been on Taeyang 4 for 3 years now, studying the strange geology of this terraformed world. He knew every rumble, every shift in the ground. This was different. This was something alive. Did everyone hear that? Haijin's voice crackled over the comm system. She sounded as shaken as Taemin felt. Seismic activity? Sang-woo suggested, but even the old security officer didn't sound convinced. Taemin ran to the control room where Jia was already working at her console, her fingers flying over the keyboard. The young scientist's face was pale, her eyes wide with excitement and fear. "It's not geological," Jia said without looking up. "My sensors picked up biological markers. Whatever made that sound is alive. And it's huge." Haijin entered the room, still wearing her flight suit from the morning patrol. Her short hair was messy, and grease stained her hands. "How huge are we talking?" Jia pulled up a holographic display. Red dots scattered across a 3-dimensional map of the valley. Based on the sound waves and vibration patterns, the source is approximately 15 kilometers from here. The size... She paused, double-checking her numbers. The size is hard to believe. At least 200 meters long, maybe more. "That's impossible," Sang-woo said from the doorway. The older man crossed his arms over his chest. "Nothing that big could survive on this planet. We surveyed everything before we built the colony." "I know what my sensors say," Jia replied firmly. "Something that big is out there, and it's making noise." Taemin looked at the map, thinking. The Crimson Valley stretched for hundreds of kilometers, a deep scar on the planet's surface left behind by ancient volcanic activity. Most of it remained unexplored. The human colony focused on the northern section, where rich mineral deposits made mining profitable. The southern reaches were considered too dangerous, with unstable ground and toxic crystal formations. "We need to investigate," Taemin decided. "If there's an unknown life form on this planet, we have to document it. That's why we're here." Sang-woo shook his head. "It could be dangerous. Everything worth discovering is dangerous," Haijin said with a grin. She was already heading for the door. "I'll prep the transport. We can be ready to leave in an hour." The sound came again 12 hours later, just as the sun was setting. This time, Taemin was ready. He and his small team were already halfway to the source, traveling in Haijin's modified transport vehicle. The machine could handle the rough terrain of the valley, crawling over rocks and through narrow passes. When the cry began, Haijin stopped the vehicle. They all climbed out, standing in the orange twilight, listening. It was not like any animal sound Taemin had ever heard. It was too deep, too complex. It reminded him of whale songs from Earth's oceans, but sadder somehow. More lonely. The sound echoed off the valley walls, multiplying and overlapping until it seemed like the whole world was singing in grief. "It sounds like it's in pain," Jia whispered. The sound faded slowly, reluctantly, like someone calling for help who knew no help would come. They made camp that night in the shadow of a massive rock formation. Sang-woo set up motion sensors around the perimeter while Haijin worked on the vehicle systems. Taemin and Jia studied the data they had collected. "The sound is definitely a call," Jia explained, showing Taemin her analysis. "See these patterns? They repeat. It's trying to communicate something. With who?" Taemin asked. G- had no answer. They found the first scale the next morning. Haijin nearly drove over it before Sang-woo shouted for her to stop. It was embedded in the ground, half buried in red dirt. When they dug it out, they found a plate of what looked like metal and bone fused together. It was the size of a dinner table, and rainbow colors danced across its surface in the sunlight. "This is organic," Taemin said, running his scanner over the object. "But the structure is unlike anything in our database. It's stronger than steel, but it grew naturally, like a shell or scale." They found more as they traveled deeper into the valley. Dozens of them, scattered across kilometers. Each one was slightly different in size and color. Whatever creature these came from must have lost them over time, shedding them like a snake sheds its skin. "We're getting close," Hyjin said, checking her navigation system. "The signal source is just beyond that ridge." Taemin's hands were sweating inside his gloves. Part of him was excited. Part of him was terrified. What would they find? They reached the ridge at midday. Hyjin sent her drone ahead first, wanting to see what lay beyond before they committed to climbing down. The small flying machine zipped over the edge and disappeared from sight. Hyjin watched her screen, controlling the drone remotely. Then her expression changed. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "What is it?" Sang-woo demanded. "What do you see?" Hyjin turned the screen so they all could see. The drone's camera showed the valley floor below. And there, taking up almost the entire space, was the creature dotted looked like something from ancient myths. A dragon from old Earth stories, with a long serpentine body covered in those rainbow scales. It had 4 massive legs, each one ending in claws that dug into the ground. Wings stretched from its back, but they were folded tight against its body. A long tail curved around its form. And its head. The head was larger than their entire transport vehicle, with a snout and horns that reminded Taemin of ancient dinosaur bones he had seen in museums. But the dragon was not moving. It was trapped in crystal dot. The valley floor glittered with the same toxic mineral formations that made this area dangerous. Except here, the crystals had grown over the dragon, around it, through it. The creature was embedded in a prison of stone and mineral, held fast like an insect in amber. "It's still alive," Jia said, her voice barely a whisper. She was looking at her medical scanner. "I'm reading a heartbeat. Neural activity. It's alive and it's aware. How long has it been here?" Hyjin asked. Tae-min took readings from the crystal formation. His hands shook as he input the data. The results made him feel sick. Based on the crystal growth rate, at least 300 years. Maybe more. 300 years, trapped, alone. Slowly dying. No wonder its cry sounded so sad. "We have to help it," Jia said. Sang-woo looked at the massive creature, then at their small team and limited equipment. "How?" "We're 4 people with 1 transport and basic tools. That thing is enormous. The crystals have grown into its body. Even if we could free it, the damage might be too severe." "We have to try," Taemin said. He was already planning, already thinking. "First, we need to understand what it is. Then we need to figure out if we can communicate with it. Then we plan a rescue. The colony administrator will never approve this," Sang-woo warned. "We don't have the resources." Taemin looked at the dragon, at the magnificent and terrible sight of something so powerful brought so low. He thought about that mournful cry, calling out every 12 hours. Calling for 300 years with no answer. "Then we'll convince them," he said. "Because we're humans, and humans don't leave people to die alone." "That's not a person," Sang-woo pointed out. Tae-min smiled sadly. "Isn't it?" The temporary camp grew around the dragon like a small village. Taemin had called for reinforcements, and the colony sent Donghayan, their best medic, and Nari, who specialized in alien communication systems. They arrived 2 days after the discovery, bringing with them equipment and supplies. Donghayan was a quiet man with gray hair and steady hands. He set up his medical scanners immediately, barely speaking to anyone as he worked. For hours, he studied the dragon's vital signs, taking measurements and running tests. When he finally shared his findings, his face was grim. "It's dying," Dong Haiyan said simply. "The crystal formation is not just trapping it. The minerals are poisoning its system. I can see signs of organ failure, tissue damage, and neural degradation. The creature's body is slowly shutting down." "How long does it have?" Taemin asked. Dong Haiyan shook his head. "Days, maybe weeks. I'm surprised it survived this long. Its biology is incredibly resilient. But even resilience has limits." Nari was having more success with her work. She had set up communication equipment all around the dragon, trying different frequencies and signal patterns. She was a small woman with quick movements and eyes that never stopped analyzing everything around her. "I think it knows we're here," Nari said on the third day. She was staring at her monitors, watching waves of data scroll past. "When I send certain electromagnetic pulses, I get responses. Not random responses. Patterns. It's trying to talk back." "Can you understand what it's saying?" Haijin asked. "Not yet. But I will." That night, Nari made contact. She had been working late, adjusting her equipment while the others slept. She was trying a new approach, using a broader spectrum of signals. When the dragon responded, the force of it knocked her backward out of her chair. Taemin woke to her screaming. He ran from his tent, followed by the others. They found Nari on the ground, her nose bleeding, her hands pressed against her head. Her equipment was sparking, overloaded. "What happened?" Dong Haiyan demanded, immediately checking her pupils and pulse. "It talked to me," Nari gasped. "Inside my head. Images. Feelings. It's not just alive, it's intelligent. And it's so sad. So incredibly sad." They helped her back to her tent. Dong Haiyan gave her medicine for the headache and made her rest. But Nari couldn't stop talking about what she had experienced. "It showed me things," she said, staring at the ceiling of her tent. "Memories, I think. I saw stars I didn't recognize. I saw cities that floated in space. I saw others like it, hundreds of them, flying between worlds." "Others?" Taemin leaned forward. "You mean there are more creatures like this?" "Were," Nari corrected. "There were more. They're all gone now. This one is the last." Over the next few days, Nari worked with the dragon more carefully. She learned to moderate the connection, to protect herself from the overwhelming force of its consciousness. Slowly, painfully, the creature shared its story. Its species was called the Velkari. They were not exactly animals and not exactly machines. They were something in between, created by an ancient civilization as living starships. Each Velkari was grown, not built, and each one was conscious and self-aware. They could travel between stars, carrying their creators across the galaxy. "The civilization that made them is extinct," Nari explained to the team. "The dragon showed me what happened. There was a war, a plague, disasters one after another. The Velkari watched their creators die out over centuries. They tried to save them, tried to help, but they failed. So, what is this one doing here?" Sangwoo asked. Nari's face was pale. "Running. It was the last one left, fleeing from the final destruction of its home worlds. It was damaged, hurt, barely functioning. It came to this planet looking for a safe place to land and heal. But the crystals," she gestured at the glittering prison. "The planet's minerals are toxic to its biology. It crashed, and before it could escape, the crystals started growing. It's been trapped here ever since." 300 years, Haijin said softly. "Alone for 300 years. Jia had been listening quietly, but now she spoke up. "Does it have a name?" Nari smiled sadly. The closest translation I can manage is last hope carried forward. It was carrying something important when it crashed. Something it was supposed to protect. What? Taemin asked. I don't know yet. It hasn't shown me that part. But whatever it is, the dragon considers it more important than its own life. It keeps trying to show me, but the images are confused, fragmented. I think it's weakening. Taemin made a decision. We need to save it. We need to bring this to the colony administrators. We need more people, more equipment, more everything. They'll say no, Sang-woo warned. The colony barely has enough resources for itself. We can't spare what would be needed for a rescue operation this big. Then we make them understand, Taemin said firmly. We make them see what I see, what we all see. The next morning, Taemin recorded a message for the colony council. He stood in front of the dragon, speaking to the camera that Haijin held. My name is Taemin, and I am the lead xenobiologist of Research Outpost 7. Behind me is the most important discovery in human history. This creature is not just an animal. It's a person. It's intelligent, conscious, and aware. It has culture, history, and knowledge. It came from a civilization that died out while humans were still learning to make fire. And it's dying here, alone, after 300 years of suffering. He paused, looking back at the dragon. The morning sun made its scales glow with rainbow light, beautiful and terrible. I know our colony is struggling. I know we have limited resources. I know that saving this creature will cost us time, energy, and materials that we can barely spare. But I also know that we're human, and humans are defined by our choices. We can choose to walk away, to let this being die alone and forgotten. Or we can choose to help, even when it's hard, even when it costs us. Taemin turned back to the camera. I'm asking the council to approve a rescue mission. I'm asking for volunteers, for equipment, for a chance to prove that humanity is worth something in this galaxy. Because if we can't show compassion to a dying stranger, then what kind of species are we? The message was sent. They waited. While they waited, Nari continued her work with the dragon. Each day she spent hours in communion with it, learning its language, understanding its memories. The connection was getting stronger, clearer. On the 5th day, the dragon shared something new, something that made Nari cry. It's carrying children, she told the team that evening. Not exactly children, but consciousness seeds. The last genetic material of the Valkyrie species. They're stored inside its body in a kind of biostasis. The dragon was supposed to find a new world, a safe place, and plant them. They would grow into new Valkyrie. The species would continue. How many? Dong Hyen asked. 12, Nari said. 12 potential lives. The last hope of an entire species. Everyone was quiet, absorbing this information. Can they survive? Taemin finally asked. Dong Hyen ran his medical scanners over the dragon again, focusing on the interior of its massive body. They're alive, he said after a long moment. Barely, but alive. The dragon has been using what little energy it has left to keep them in stasis. It's been sacrificing itself to protect them. For 300 years, Jia said wonderingly. For 300 years, Dong Hyen confirmed. Haijin stood up abruptly. Then we're not just saving one life. We're saving 13 lives. We're saving an entire species from extinction. The response from the colony came the next day. The council wanted to meet with Taemin in person. Haijin flew him back to the main settlement, a journey that took 3 hours. The colony administrator, Hyeon-sik, was a tired-looking man in his 50s. He met Taemin in his office, surrounded by screens showing resource charts and supply projections. Your request is impossible, Hyeon-sik said without preamble. I've reviewed what you're asking for. The power generators, the mining equipment, the personnel. We don't have those resources to spare. We're barely keeping this colony functional as it is." "I understand," Taemin said. "But there is no but," Hyansik interrupted. "I'm sorry for that creature. Truly, I am. But my responsibility is to the 3,000 humans who live here. I can't risk their survival for an alien we know nothing about." Taemin pulled out a datapad. "Let me show you something." He played the recordings Nari had made, the images and memories the dragon had shared. He showed the beauty of the Velkari civilization, the tragedy of their extinction, the loneliness of the last survivor. Hyansik watched in silence. When the recordings ended, his eyes were wet. "The council will vote," he said quietly. "I can't promise anything, but they'll vote." The vote took 3 days. 3 days during which Taemin paced the corridors of the colony administration building, unable to eat, unable to sleep properly. Hygiene stayed with him, bringing him food he didn't touch and coffee he drank too quickly. Back at the dragon site, the rest of the team continued their work. Donghyan monitored the creature's vital signs, which were steadily weakening. Nari maintained her communication sessions, though each one left her exhausted and emotionally drained. Jia and Sang-woo prepared plans for a rescue operation, just in case the vote went their way. "The dragon is getting weaker," Donghyan reported over the comlink. "I don't know how much time we have left. Maybe a week, maybe less." The colony council met in the main assembly hall. Every colonist was invited to observe, and the room was packed. Taemin stood at the front, his presentation displayed on the large screens behind him. He had prepared for hours, gathering every piece of data, every image, every argument he could think of. Hyansik opened the meeting. "We're here to decide whether to commit colony resources to rescuing an alien creature discovered in the Crimson Valley. Taemin will present the case for rescue. Then I will present the case against. Then we vote." Smyman spoke for 30 minutes. He showed the recordings of the dragon. He explained the Velkari civilization and their extinction. He talked about the consciousness seeds, the 12 potential lives waiting to be born. He displayed Donghai's medical analysis showing that rescue was theoretically possible, though difficult and expensive. "This is about more than saving one creature," Taemin concluded. "This is about who we are as humans. We came to the stars carrying our values with us. One of those values is compassion. Another is the belief that all intelligent life has worth. If we turn our backs on this being, we're saying those values only apply when it's easy and cheap. I'm asking you to prove that our values mean something even when they cost us." He sat down to scattered applause. Hyansik took his place. The administrator looked uncomfortable, like he didn't want to be making these arguments. But he spoke clearly and honestly. "Everything Taemin said is true. This is a living, intelligent being in need of help. And yes, we should help if we can. But we need to be realistic about what 'if we can' actually means." He brought up resource charts. "This rescue operation will require 40% of our power generation capacity for at least 4 days. It will take our heavy mining equipment offline for a week. It will require 100 volunteers working around the clock. And if something goes wrong, if we damage critical systems or lose equipment, we might not recover. We could be stranding ourselves on this planet with no way to call for help if an emergency happens." Hyansik looked out at the crowd. "I know what the right choice feels like. Emotionally, morally, the right choice is to help. But practically, financially, logically, the right choice might be to focus on our own survival. We have 3,000 people here, including 400 children. Can I ask them to risk their futures for a creature we met a week ago?" The room was silent when he finished. The vote was open for 24 hours. Every adult colonist could cast their vote through the computer system. Yes or no. Help or don't, helped. Taemin went back to his quarters and tried to sleep. He couldn't. Instead, he sat by his window, watching the sun set over the alien landscape, wondering if he had done enough. Jin found him there at midnight. "Come on," she said. "Sitting here worrying won't change anything. Let's go for a walk." They walked through the quiet colony streets. Most people were asleep, but some were still awake. Groups gathered in common areas, discussing the vote. Taemin heard snippets of conversation as they passed. "Can't afford. It would want someone to help. Think about the children. Children here need us too." They ended up at the colony's observation deck, looking out at the stars. Earth was out there somewhere, so far away it couldn't be seen. They were 40 light years from home, making their own decisions, building their own society. "You know what I think?" Hyjin said. "I think we're going to vote yes." "How do you know?" Taemin asked. "Because we're human," she said with a smile. "And humans are idiots who always choose the hard way when the hard way is the right way. It's what makes us special. It's what makes us worthy of being out here among the stars." The next morning, the results came in. Taemin was in the assembly hall when Hyun-sik announced them. "The vote is complete," the administrator said. 2,198 votes were cast. 1,597 voted yes. 601 voted no. 73%. Nearly three-quarters of the colony had voted to help. Hyun-sik looked at Taemin. The older man's expression was complicated, mixing concern with pride. "You have your rescue mission. Make it count." The colony mobilized like Taemin had never seen before. Within hours, volunteers were signing up. Engineers, miners, medics, technicians. Even people with no relevant skills offered to help with cooking, cleaning, and logistics. A young engineer named Yoonji organized the volunteer teams with military precision, creating shift schedules that would keep work going 24 hours a day. Hyjin requisitioned every piece of heavy equipment they could spare. Massive excavation machines, power generators, support structures, and more. She arranged transport to get everything to the Dragon site, a logistical nightmare that would have been impossible without the volunteers. Sang-woo took charge of safety. He knew that working around the toxic crystals would be dangerous. He set up decontamination stations, distributed protective equipment, and created emergency protocols. G-Ah and Dong-hai worked together to develop the actual rescue plan. They needed to neutralize the crystals without harming the dragon. They needed to support the creature's massive weight as they freed it. They needed to treat its injuries as they worked. It was like performing surgery on a building-sized patient while also doing demolition work around it. "We have 96 hours," Dong-hyun announced at the first planning meeting. "That's how long before the dragon's neural functions will collapse completely. After that, even if we free it, it won't survive. Then we work fast," Yoonji said. She was young, barely 24, but she had the confidence of someone much older. "I've divided the volunteers into 4 shifts. Each shift works 6 hours, then rests 6 hours. We keep fresh people on the job at all times." The equipment began arriving at the Dragon site that afternoon. Taemin watched as the temporary camp transformed into a major operation. Tents gave way to prefabricated buildings. Small generators were replaced by industrial power units. The Dragon site looked like a construction zone, busy and loud and full of purpose. Nari continued her communication with the dragon throughout all of this. She explained what the humans were trying to do, showed it the plans, helped it understand that help was coming. The dragon's response surprised everyone. "It's sharing knowledge," Nari explained. "It wants to help us help it. It's showing me how its biology works, where the crystals are most dangerous, how to avoid damaging critical systems. And it's showing me more." "More what?" Taemin asked. Everything, Nari said, her eyes wide with wonder. Star charts, technology, history, the entire knowledge base of Valkyrie civilization. It's giving all of it to us. Why? Sangwoo asked. Because if it dies, someone should remember, Nari said simply. Someone should know that the Valkyrie existed, that they built beautiful things and dreamed big dreams. It doesn't want its people to be forgotten. The rescue operation began at dawn on the 4th day after the vote. 100 volunteers took their positions around the dragon. Excavation machines powered up. Medical scanners monitored every vital sign. Sangwoo walked the perimeter one last time, checking safety equipment. Tae-min stood next to the dragon's head, looking up at its closed eye. He could see tiny movements, the eye shifting beneath the lid. It was aware. It was watching them through other senses. We're going to get you out, he said quietly. I promise. Through Nari, the dragon responded. Not with words, but with a feeling. Gratitude mixed with hope, mixed with fear. Eung gave the signal. The excavation began. The first stage was removing the loose crystal formations around the dragon's body. This was the easiest part, relatively speaking. The machines could do most of the work, carefully breaking up and removing the toxic minerals. But even this stage was dangerous. The crystals released poisonous dust when broken. Workers had to wear full protective suits and rotate frequently to avoid exposure. Hygiene had modified the excavation machines with specialized tools. Instead of crude scoops and hammers, they now had precision cutters and gentle lifters. She piloted one of the machines herself, working with delicate care around the dragon's wings. Dong Hyan and his medical team stood ready with their treatment. They had developed a chemical compound that could neutralize the crystal poison in the dragon's bloodstream. But they couldn't administer it until enough of the creature was freed to access its circulation system. The work was slow. Painfully slow. Hours passed and they had only cleared a fraction of the crystals. But they were making progress. We're on schedule, Eunji reported at the end of the first shift. If we maintain this pace, we'll finish with hours to spare. But they didn't maintain the pace. Because halfway through the second shift, something went. The dragon's cry of grief lasted for 5 minutes, though it felt like an eternity. Every human at the worksite stood frozen, listening to 300 years of denied sorrow finally being released. When the sound finally faded, the silence that followed was heavy and profound. Nari was weeping openly, her connection to the dragon making her feel everything it felt. Taemin put his hand on her shoulder, offering what small comfort he could. Around them, volunteers wiped their eyes and slowly returned to work. They understood now that this wasn't just a rescue. It was something more complicated and more important. What will it do? Sangwoo asked quietly. The old security officer had seen death before in his years as a soldier. But this was different. This was watching someone realize their entire life's purpose had been built on a lie they told themselves to survive. I don't know, Nari said. I'm trying to talk to it, but it's retreating inside itself. It's processing. The final crystals came away 2 hours later. The dragon was completely free for the first time in 3 centuries. The support structures held it carefully, preventing injury. Dong Hyan's medical team rushed in, checking vital signs, administering the last doses of treatment. It's stable, Dong Hyan reported. Physically, it should recover. But mentally, he shook his head. Nari stood before the dragon's head. Its eye opened, just a crack, and she felt the force of its consciousness touch hers. The dragon was asking a question. The same question it had been asking for 300 years, but now with full awareness of the answer. No, Nari said softly, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry. They're gone. They've been gone for a long time. The dragon's eye closed. For a moment, Nari thought it had given up, that it had decided to simply die. Then she felt something new from it. Not anger or despair, but a strange kind of peace. The dragon was finally allowing itself to feel what it had denied for so long. "It wants to move," Nari said suddenly. "It wants to fly one more time. Is that safe?" Dong Haiyan asked, concerned. "Its body is still healing. It doesn't care," Nari replied. "It needs this. It's been trapped for 300 years. It needs to feel free before." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "Help it," Tamin ordered. "Remove the support structures. Clear the area. Give it space." The volunteers worked quickly, dismantling the framework they had so carefully built. The dragon's muscles tensed as it took its own weight for the first time. It was weak, terribly weak, but it was standing. The dragon's wings unfolded. They were torn and scarred, but they spread wide, catching the morning sun. Rainbow colors danced across the membranes. It was the most beautiful thing Tamin had ever seen. With a great effort, the dragon pushed itself into the air. Its flight was awkward and painful, nothing like the grace it must have once possessed, but it was flying. After 300 years of being trapped, it was in the air again. The volunteers cheered and cried, watching the ancient creature circle overhead. The dragon flew in a wide spiral, slowly gaining altitude. It flew over the camp, over the place where it had been imprisoned, over the valley where it had called for help for so long. Then it turned and flew toward the mountains. "Where is it going?" Haijian asked. Nari was still connected to the dragon's mind. "To the highest peak. It wants to bury its children. To say goodbye properly. We should go with it," Tamin said. "It shouldn't be alone for this." They piled into transports, following the dragon's slow, painful flight. The creature led them to the tallest mountain in the region, a peak that rose above the clouds. It landed near the summit, on a flat area that overlooked the entire Crimson Valley. The view was breathtaking. From here, they could see for hundreds of kilometers. The red rock formations, the crystal fields glittering in the sun, the thin ribbon of the colony settlement in the distance. It was beautiful and harsh, this world that had become both prison and tomb. The dragon curled itself carefully on the ground. It opened its chest plates, revealing the 12 biostasis chambers where the consciousness seeds rested. The chambers were beautiful things, crystalline structures grown from the dragon's own body, and inside each one, a small, lifeless form. Nari approached slowly, reverently. The dragon gave her permission to touch, to help. With gentle hands, she and Dong Haiyan removed each consciousness seed from its chamber. They were surprisingly small, each one about the size of a human infant, with forms that suggested what the Valkyrie looked like before they became living starships. They had delicate features, scales that still held a hint of rainbow color, tiny folded wings. The volunteers helped dig. The mountain stone was hard, but they worked with their hands and tools, creating 12 small graves in a circle. They lined each grave with soft cloth, making them as comfortable as possible. One by one, they laid the consciousness seeds to rest. Nari spoke words in the Valkyrie language, phrases the dragon taught her. Prayers, maybe, or just words of farewell. The other humans stood silent, heads bowed, honoring these lives that never got the chance to live. When the last seed was buried, the dragon made a sound. Not a cry of grief this time, but something gentler. A lullaby, perhaps? A parent singing their children to sleep. Tae-Min stepped forward. He didn't know what to say. How do you comfort someone who has lost everything? How do you offer hope to someone whose mission has failed? You protected them, he said simply. For 300 years, you kept them safe. You never gave up. That matters. That means something. Through Nari, the dragon responded. Not with words, but with an image. Taemin saw himself and the other humans through the dragon's eyes. He saw their determination, their compassion, their choice to help at great cost to themselves. And he understood what the dragon was trying to communicate. "You're saying we're like them," Taemin said softly. "Like your creators. Like the Valkyrie." The dragon confirmed this. The Valkyrie had valued compassion, cooperation, and the protection of the weak. They had built a civilization based on these ideals. And now, watching the humans work and sacrifice and care, the dragon recognized those same values. "We would be honored to remember your people," Taemin said, "to carry their knowledge forward, to make sure the Valkyrie are not forgotten." The dragon shared more than all the knowledge it had promised, now freely given. Technology that was centuries ahead of human science, philosophy and art and history. The entire legacy of a civilization, passed from the last survivor to new keepers. G-A recorded everything, her equipment capturing data that would take years to fully analyze. The Valkyrie had solved problems humanity still struggled with. They had created beauty that made human art look primitive. They had dreamed dreams that spanned galaxies. "We'll build a monument," Hyjin said suddenly, "right here, so everyone will know what happened, so people can come and remember." "Not just a monument," Jia added. "A library, a place to study Valkyrie culture, to learn from them, to keep them alive in memory." The dragon liked this idea. Through Nari, it helped them understand how such a place should be built, what it should contain. It wanted the world to know that the Valkyrie had existed, had mattered, had contributed something good to the universe. The day wore on. The sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The dragon's breathing had become labored. Donghyan's scanners showed what everyone had known would happen. The rescue had saved the dragon's life, but only temporarily. The damage from 300 years of poison and starvation was too great. The dragon was dying, but dying free and at peace. "I'm sorry we couldn't do more," Taemin said. The dragon disagreed. Through Nari, it showed them what their rescue had truly accomplished. Not the saving of a life, though that mattered, but the ending of 300 years of loneliness, the gift of companionship in the final hours, the chance to finally let go of the burden it had carried for so long. "You gave it peace," Nari translated. That was more than it ever hoped for. As darkness fell, the volunteers built fires. They didn't want to leave the dragon alone, so they stayed. All of them, every single person who had worked on the rescue. They sat in a circle around the dying creature, keeping vigil. People shared stories. Sanwoo talked about his time in the wars, about comrades he had lost. Sunhee, the old woman who had sorted crystal pieces, told stories about her husband who had died before they left Earth. Umji spoke about her fear of being forgotten after death, of leaving nothing behind. The dragon listened to all of it. Tsunari, it shared its own stories. Tales of the Valkyrie at their height, flying between stars, building wonders. Stories of the last days, watching their civilization fade. And stories of its long wait. On this planet, never giving up hope, even when hope seemed foolish. "Every 12 hours I called," the dragon shared. "Every 12 hours for 300 years. I called for help, for rescue, for someone to hear. And finally, someone did. Finally, someone came. We heard you," Taemin said. "We heard you and we came. Because that's what people do. That's what good people do." The dragon's breathing became slower. Its heartbeat, that massive drum that they could all feel through the ground, began to fade. Donghyan checked his scanners one last time, then shook his head. There was nothing more to be done. Nari held the connection, staying with the dragon's consciousness as it. Taemin stood in the red emergency lighting, aware that everyone was watching him. The dragon's life was in his hands. So was the colony's safety. One wrong choice could doom them all. "Use the emergency reserves," he said. "Tay-Min." Sang-Woo started. "Use them," Tamin repeated firmly. "We made a promise. We don't break promises just because things get hard." Haijin nodded and ran to implement the power reroute. Within 20 minutes, the machines hummed back to life. The work continued, but everyone felt the weight of what they had just done. They were truly committed now. There was no safety net left. Back at the colony, Hyun-Sik received the report about the power situation. He stood in his office, looking at the resource displays that now showed red warnings everywhere. They were operating on the edge, with no margin for error. One more problem and people could die. He picked up his comm device, intending to call Taemin and order everyone back. Then he stopped. The colony had voted for this. They knew the risks. They had chosen compassion over safety. He couldn't overrule that choice just because it was scary. Hyun-Sik put down the comm device. Instead, he sent a message to all colonists. Emergency power reserves are now committed to the rescue operation. All non-essential systems are being shut down to compensate. We are all in this together. At the Dragon site, the work continued through the night. Shift after shift, volunteers cycled through, each team pushing forward a little more. The toxic crystals fell away piece by piece. The dragon's body slowly emerged, like a sculpture being revealed by a patient artist. Dong Hyun and his medical team finally got their chance during the third shift. Enough of the dragon's chest area was clear that they could access what passed for blood vessels in the creature's biology. They injected their neutralizing compound, hoping it would stop the crystal poison from doing more damage. "Vitals are stabilizing," Dong Hyun reported. "Not improving, but at least not getting worse. The treatment is working." Nari sat near the dragon's head, maintaining constant communication. She could feel the creature's pain, its fear, its desperate hope. The dragon was suffering, but it was fighting to stay alive. "It's asking about the timeline," Nari said. "It wants to know if we'll finish in time." "Tell it we will," Taemin said, though he wasn't sure if that was true. They were behind schedule now. The power failure had cost them precious hours. Yoonji recalculated the work plan, trying to find ways to speed up without compromising safety. She pushed the shifts to 7 hours each, giving people less rest time. Some volunteers protested. Most didn't. A miner named Junho worked 3 shifts in a row without sleeping, operating his excavation machine with expert precision. When Sang-Woo ordered him to rest, Junho refused. "This thing has been suffering for 300 years, Junho said, his eyes red with exhaustion. "I can handle 1 sleepless night." Others followed his example. The volunteer rotations broke down as people simply refused to leave. They worked through their pain and tiredness, driven by something deeper than duty. Haijin saw an old woman named Sunhee helping to sort broken crystal pieces. Sunhee was 70 years old and had no business being at a dangerous worksite. But there she was, wearing protective gear that was too big for her, doing her part. "Why are you here?" Haijin asked her during a brief break. Sunhee smiled, her wrinkled face beautiful in the work lights. "Because I want my grandchildren to live in a universe where people help each other. I want them to know that their grandmother was part of something good." The dragon began to share more memories with Nari, perhaps sensing that time was running short. It opened itself completely, holding nothing back. Nari experienced 300 years of loneliness in compressed bursts of consciousness. She felt what it was like to call out for help every 12 hours, knowing no one would answer. She understood the depth of its dedication to the consciousness seeds it carried, but she also sensed something else, something the dragon had been hiding. "We need to talk," Nari said to Taemin during the 4th shift. She pulled him aside, away from the workers. Her face was troubled. "What's wrong?" Taemin asked. "The consciousness seeds," Nari said quietly. "I've been trying to understand them better, trying to figure out what we'll need to do with them once we free the dragon. But the images I'm getting from the dragon are strange. Confused. There's something it's not telling me clearly. Can you ask it directly?" "I've tried. It keeps showing me the same memories over and over. The seeds are important. The seeds must survive. The seeds are the future." But she trailed off, uncertain. "But what?" "But I'm not sure it's thinking clearly anymore. Taemin, it's been alone for 300 years. It's been in constant pain, slowly dying. That kind of suffering damages the mind. What if it's not entirely rational about the seeds?" Taemin felt a chill. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need Donghyan to scan those seeds carefully once we can access them. We need to know their actual condition, not just what the dragon believes about them." They brought Donghyan into the conversation. The medic listened carefully, his expression growing more concerned. "I'll do a deep scan as soon as I can reach that part of its body," Donghyan promised. "But it'll take time. The scanning equipment has to penetrate the dragon's biological shields without damaging anything." By the start of the fifth shift, they had cleared roughly 70% of the crystals. The dragon's basic shape was now fully visible. Its scales gleamed even under the harsh work lights. Its claws, each one the size of a person, flexed slightly as feeling returned to its trapped limbs. "It's magnificent," Jia breathed, seeing the creature properly for the first time, but there was still so much work to do. The crystals that remained were the most dangerous ones, grown deep into the dragon's body. Removing them required surgical precision. One mistake could sever something vital and kill the dragon. Instantly, Ai-jin and her best machine operators took over this delicate work. They used laser cutters that could slice through crystal without touching the organic tissue beneath. The work was agonizingly slow. Every cut had to be checked, double-checked, triple-checked. Tae-min watched the time display on his datapad. 72 hours had passed since the rescue began. 24 hours remained before the deadline. They were cutting it incredibly close. Donghyan finally got access to the dragon's interior where the consciousness seeds were stored. He set up his advanced medical scanners, equipment that could see through organic matter and read biological states with incredible detail. The scan took 2 hours. When it was done, Donghyan's hands were shaking. "Come in," he called over the private comm channel. "Nari, I need you to see this, now." They met in one of the prefabricated buildings, away from the other workers. Donghyan displayed his scan results on a holoscreen. The images showed 12 small objects inside the dragon's body, each one encased in a biological cocoon. "These are the consciousness seeds," Donghyan said. His voice was strange, carefully controlled. "I've analyzed them thoroughly. I know what they are." "I know what they were." "Were?" Nari asked. Donghyan pointed at the scan. "They're perfectly preserved. The dragon's stasis system worked flawlessly, but..." He took a deep breath. "But they're not alive. They haven't been alive for a very long time. Based on cellular degradation patterns, I'd estimate they died within the first 10 to 20 years after the crash." The room was silent. "You're saying they're dead?" Taemin asked. "All of them?" "All of them," Donghyan confirmed. "The dragon has been protecting corpses for nearly 300 years. Nari made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. "It knows," she whispered. "Deep down, it knows. That's why it wouldn't show me clearly. That's why the images were so confused and painful." "It's been in denial," Donghyan said gently. "Probably for centuries. The truth was too terrible to accept, so it convinced itself the seeds were still viable, that its mission could still succeed, that its suffering had meaning. Taemin felt like the ground was falling away beneath him. All this effort and risk and hope, and the thing they were trying to save had already failed 300 years ago. Does the dragon understand that they're dead? He asked. Nari shook her head. Some part of it does, but it won't let itself believe it. It can't. If it admits the seeds are dead, then it has to admit that everything it suffered was for nothing. That it failed. That it's truly, completely alone. Do we tell it? Taemin asked. I don't know, Nari said. I don't know if that would be merciful or cruel. They stood there, 3 humans trying to make an impossible decision. Outside, 100 volunteers continued working, not knowing that the mission's purpose had just changed fundamentally. We keep going, Taemin finally said. We finish the rescue. We free it from the crystals. We save its life. And then we let it decide what happens next. Even though the seeds are dead? Dong Hyan asked. Especially because the seeds are dead, Taemin said. It deserves the truth. It deserves closure. And it deserves to make its own choice about what comes after. They went back to work. The volunteers noticed nothing different. The machines continued their careful excavation. The medical teams administered more treatments. The dragon's vital signs grew slowly stronger as the poison left its system. With 6 hours remaining, they reached the final phase. The last crystals were being removed.